last time you bought a horse and sent home some guy.
We're experiencing
get for 3 days. The guy left it on the trailer.
Well, that's not good.
So
He took a semi back?
no, I just
We're on.
I bring bad luck everywhere.
We're on now.
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, we'll call sorry for the technical difficulties. It's 4:03, and we'll call this February 20th meeting of the Salina Planning Commission to order. Margie, can you confirm that we have met the Kansas Open Meeting posting requirements?
Yes, I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Dean, roll call.
I'll call roll. Commissioner Sydow,
Here.
Commissioner Van Coveren,
here.
Commissioner Alt,
Here.
Commissioner Farber,
Here.
Commissioner Waters, Chair Mike Sell.
Here.
So we have 5 of the 6 appointed members here today. That still constitutes a quorum. And so we have provided notice of today's meeting, and we have a quorum, so we can proceed with today's Planning Commission agenda.
Okay, very good. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes. Have you all had a chance to read the minutes? And if so, is there any corrections or a motion to approve?
I'd move we approve the minutes of the February 6th meeting.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. New business. Dean?
We have a number of public hearing items for you this afternoon. There's a combined public hearing, 4 items that were continued over from February 6th, and those involve applications relating to an amendment of the city's future land use map, a potential annexation, a request to change the zoning district map, and a preliminary plat. And this all involves property that's located on the west side of I-135, north of Waterwell Road. And we'll start with the future land use map amendment, and Mr. Hers is responsible for this case, and so he'll be presenting those items.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew and Commission. On February 6th, at our last meeting, we talked about the future land use map for the property that Southlands Development owns at the northwest corner of the I-135 and Waterwell interchange. That 92 plus acres is located between Dry Creek and I-135, just north of Waterwell Road. The applicant is looking to develop a parcel at the corner, the northwest corner of that interchange, and is seeking to have the future land use map amendment as well as the property rezoned. At the last meeting, we talked about multiple options that the board may be interested in considering, and at the conclusion of that conversation, the board indicated that they felt that having commercial land use category on the south 55 acres and retaining the employment land use designation for the north remaining piece of the 98 plus acres was most appropriate. And so what we've done is we prepared a staff report that lines out the difference between the existing land use category, which is employment, and the proposed future commercial land use category. And so the primary differences is employment is designed for light and heavy type industrial activities generally, as well as some offices, so office parks. And so this property was originally viewed as an extension of the airport industrial area, basically taking the industrial activities at the airport and extending them all the way to the east to I-135. That has not come to fruition, and the applicant feels that given the proximity of this particular property to the interchange of I-135 and Waterwell, that it is more conducive to highway commercial type activities. And so in addition to the proposed commercial future land use map amendment, they're also going to be proposing a change to the zoning, which is an application that is a subcategory of item 3.1. And so the commercial activity or the commercial land use category would allow for retail and service type activities, as well as civic and institutional activities and office activities. Potential zoning districts would be C3, C5, C6, C7, and PDD. And so given the proximity of the property to the interchange, staff does believe that a amendment to the future land use category could be warranted. We do have an analysis on page 5 that goes into the criteria. There's 5 primary criteria. One is whether the amendment is justified by changing conditions in the community. And we have a response that the future land use amendment is justified because of an interest from interstate-oriented commercial business in developing the vacant property at the interchange of I-135 and Waterwell Road. Number 2 is whether the amendment advances goals and policies contained in the plan. And the requested, our answer to that is that the requested future land use amendment advances goals and policies contained in the plan because it would help provide development opportunities for interstate-oriented commercial businesses. Number 3, whether there is a public need for changing the comprehensive plan map. The response to that is there is a public need to change the comprehensive map to commercial because of the proximity of the I-135 and Waterwell interchange in relationship to this property. The close proximity makes it conducive for highway commercial oriented businesses, and employment land use classification does not list highway oriented commercial uses as appropriate, but the commercial land use category does. Number 4 is whether the public need is best served by changing the land use designation of the site in question as compared to other available properties. And in this case, the public need is best served by changing the land use designation of the subject property as compared with other available property because of the southern portion of the tract has access to existing public utilities in the Yost edition and is suitable for highway commercial business, and the proposed change in land use designation would allow for the development of a highway-oriented convenience store, which is what the applicant is looking to achieve. And lastly, the last criteria is whether the requested change would negatively impact the surrounding area. In this case, the area would not the proposed change would not negatively impact the surrounding area because it is existing to commercial development to the south. We have the Yost addition to the south of the proposed development, which is already commercially zoned with commercial activities. And we also have commercial activities on the east side of I-135. So we do have a number of alternatives that we have listed for you. One is to affirm the existing comprehensive plan. And this alternative is basically keep the future land use map to show the employment land use category at the south 55 acres. Option number 2 is you could recommend the comprehensive plan be amended to reflect the map that's on the screen, which would show the commercial land use category on the south 55.94 acres. Number 3, you could recommend that the future land use map be amended to show only the 9.47 acre tract being proposed for C7 as the change. So what that means is when we get to the rezoning case and the preliminary plat, we're going to look at a smaller section of the property which the developer has a potential business wanting to construct a convenience store, and that project is around 10 acres. And so rather than changing the future land use map for the total 55 plus acres, you would be looking at basically just the 10 acres on the corner. In this case, because of the close proximity of the site to I-135 and the Waterwell Road interchange, and because a highway-oriented business desires to construct a convenience store at this location, staff believes the site is more suitable for future commercial than future employment. And so we would recommend approval of alternative number 2, which is the amendment of the future land use map to have commercial on the south 55.94 acres, as shown on the screen. And with that, staff will take any questions you might have.
Any questions of staff?
Just, I did have one question. What is showing on the screen is option 2, correct? Because it's
Correct.
labeled 1 on the sheet.
Is it listed as one?
On the, if you roll up
On
on
the
that. a little
map, it's listed as option.
Oh, okay, so when we
That's from last
presented
time.
these to you, this was option 1 at the last meeting.
Right.
And we just recycled this map, so,
bit. Just making sure.
fair question. Appreciate it.
Very good. Any questions of staff? Other than that clarification on the map number, would the applicant care to address the commission?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Gary Hobby, representing Southwind Development Services. We do appreciate the fact that you're looking at our annexation process of whole 90-some acres, and we'd like for you to annex that, as well as change the future land use map to a commercial zoning for that 55 acres. We're unsure what's going to happen with the balance of the north almost 38 acres, so we'd like to keep that in the industrial area or the employment side as well, and see what happens later on. But we do have the tract of land, which will be the next item on your agenda, that is under contract, and we would really like to move forward with annexation and getting the comprehensive plan, future land use map amended today. I'll be glad to stand for any questions.
Any questions of Gary? Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Anybody from the audience care to address this application? And do we have anybody online?
We do,
Just-
we
Dustin?
do not have anyone from the public on Zoom currently, so anyone interested in commenting would be in the room.
Okay, doesn't appear that there's anyone in the room. This application looks pretty straightforward, and we did address it last week, some of the preliminary stuff, so I guess at this time I'd entertain discussion or action.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend approval that the future land use map be amended to show the south 55.94 acres of this 92.81 acre tract as future commercial.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve application M24-1 with option number 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
We get a clarification of the second on that motion.
Oh, right here.
Thank you.
And opposed? None being heard, the motion does carry. Okay.
So this is broken into sub-items A, B, C, and D, all under this public hearing, and so Mr. Hers will proceed to sub-item B.
So sub-item B is the annexation piece of the Windy Creek project, and the annexation piece would be for the total 92.81 acres, which is bounded by Waterwell Road on the south, I-135 on the east, Cedar Creek on the north, and then Windy Creek on the, or Dry Creek on the west there. So when we look at the property, in the criteria that we use when determining whether a property should be annexed into the city, we do note that the property is contiguous and adjacent to existing city properties, both on the north, east, and south. So three sides of the property are adjacent to city property. There is a 24-inch water line in Waterwell Road that could potentially serve the property. That water well, or that water line, was installed as part of the Yost addition in 2002, and though it was not necessarily designed to serve the proposed annexation property, it is there, so it is accessible. It was initially constructed and installed for the Yost addition, but there are utilities in that area. So this tract is not part of the cost recovery that was created for the Yost addition water line improvements, but it is there. The same is true for sanitary sewer line. There is a sanitary sewer line that has a north end terminus right at the north end of Yost Drive. So the development of this property, at least for the southern portion of the property that would be adjacent to Waterwell Road, could tie into that sewer line. Eventually, there would have to be a different solution for development further to the north. Because of a gravity feed, there's only so much property that you could gravity feed into the existing line before the line would come out of the ground. Looking at street access and street improvements, Waterwell Road is an existing street that meets city's interim street standard, but lacks curb and gutter and public sidewalks. So it would require sidewalks and curb and gutter in order to be brought up to a full city standard. Other utilities, there is natural gas distribution line as well as that runs in under Waterwell Road. So there's natural gas and electricity that could be run to this property. Storm drainage, the property would storm drain to Dry Creek. Whether or not there is detention and some of those elements we will talk more about when we get to the plat. Emergency access, emergency services. This property would be served by Fire Station number 3, which is located on Belmont and is adjacent to the city limits where police and fire already provide protection. The cost benefit of annexation, all of the development on this site would have a long-term maintenance for the city, so any street improvements that are made or public utility lines that are installed would be maintained by the city in perpetuity. The comprehensive plan, we did just talk about the comprehensive plan, and staff would also note that the property is located in the city's primary service area on the urban service area map, and the public utilities have already been extended to the adjacent site to the south, which is the Yost addition. And annexation of this property would be consistent with the policies of the city's comprehensive plan. Planning Commission alternatives. Number 1, the Planning Commission could recommend that this 92.81 acre tract of land be annexed into the city limits in order to allow the proposed development to connect to the city's utility systems. Number 2, the Planning Commission could postpone making a recommendation if additional information is needed. Number 3, the Planning Commission could recommend that this property not be annexed at this time. In this case, the property, but staff believes, is bordered by 3 sides by existing properties within the city limits, and we believe the Planning Commission could approve the application's petition to voluntarily annexation of the 92.81 acre tract and bring the property into the incorporated city limits to allow connection to city utilities. And staff would take any questions that you might have about the annexation piece of this project.
Any questions of staff?
I did want to point out one thing that's attached in the packet at the very end, which is a map of the rural water districts in Salina County. And it's admittedly a map of the whole county, and so you have to squint and find the little white area there along Waterwell Road on that map. But it is much more complicated for the city to annex a piece of property that is in a rural water district than it is to annex one that's not in a rural water district, and this is not within a rural water district, so that makes the annexation much simpler than having to deal with a rural water district boundary. So,
Dustin, on your note, the fiscal note, it said that the city would take over maintenance of Waterwell Road. How far west would that go?
Adjacent to the property.
Okay.
So what would happen is the property, if it were to be annexed and platted, then right-of-way would be dedicated for the adjacent piece of Waterwell Road, and that would become a city street that would be constructed to meet city standards and then would be maintained by the city. So that would be
both sides of the street?
yes.
Okay.
Both sides of Waterwell, and then as well as Yost Drive, which is the north-south piece of the plat that we'll get to.
could you put up the annexation map, please, Dustin? Because there is a thing we're going to have to work with, if you could scroll that up. So The area that is in gray is the description of the area that was requested for annexation, but in order to get the street and have both sides of the street in the city, that annexation would have to extend down into this area. And so the annexation area would have to include this little notch right here as well. Because if the city annexes both sides of a road, then we would annex the road into the city and not leave it in the county.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, would the applicant care to address the commission again?
Thank you, Gary Hobbies, Director of South Winds Development. And no, we don't have any major questions. We just ask for your affirmative action on annexing this 93-acre tract of land. I would stand to any questions if you have.
Any questions of Mr. Hobby?
Thank you
Thank you,
much.
Gary. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this application?
We do not have anyone online currently.
Okay. Appears that we are ready to bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I'd move that we approve the applicant's petition for voluntary annexation and that the 92.81 acre site be annexed into the corporate limits of the city to allow connection to the city's utility systems.
Now, second?
Second?
Been moved and seconded to approve application A24-1. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. All right, moving right along.
So the third item that we have is also part of the Windy Creek project and involves the potential, whoa, what in the world? Involves the potential rezoning of the first piece of the development that the developer is looking to construct for a convenience store. So there's a proposed convenience store at the northwest corner of the I-135 water well interchange, and all of the entirety of the property that you just talked about for annexing is currently county ag, and the applicant is looking to rezone this property to C7, which is our highway commercial district. That zoning district was designed to permit development of commercial uses associated with interchange areas and major access corridors and interstate interchanges, which this is. So we do have the zoning ordinance requirements that are listed in the staff report. The proposed lot, which is a little under 10 acres, 9.47 acres, does meet all of those requirements of the C7 zoning district. The applicant is requesting straight C7, but staff would note that PC7 has historically been used for properties that are in gateway areas along interstate interchanges. And part of the reason for this is to ensure that the quality of the development and that any conditions that are needed for the property to fit in well with the surrounding area and the character of the area can be addressed through conditions on the planned site plan. And so when you have a planned district, a planned commercial district, the difference between that, in other words, the difference between PC7 versus C7 is PC7 does require excuse me, a final site development plan, which has a site plan, a landscape plan, and then building elevation drawings to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. And so that is one of the main differences between C7 and PC7. But we would note that historically, on properties that are at major interchanges, the Planning Commission and City Commission has required a planned commercial district of some kind. Looking at the suitability of the site and the existing area, while the site is not unsuitable for light industrial type uses, which we've talked about with the employment land use category, the site, given its location and proximity to the interchange, would be conducive for highway commercial activities and uses such as the proposed convenience store. Looking at the character of the neighborhood, the proposed C7 zoning would be similar to the zoning that we have on the south side of Yost. So if we were to look at the Yost addition to the south, we would note that those properties are already zoned PC7, so this proposed zoning change would be in line with adjacent properties to the south. The site does have access to public utility services and fire protection services from Fire Station number 3. Conformance to the comprehensive plan, we discussed that as the first item of the Windy Creek project, and the future land use map would need to be amended to commercial in order to support the zoning change from agricultural to C7 or PC7, and that's something that we've already addressed. Comments? The interstate interchange acts as a gateway into the community, and so given that, staff does feel that PC7 component would be an appropriate zoning change for this particular property. By having planned commercial or planned development district zoning at the interchange, it increases development standard and typically improves the design and aesthetic of the final product, and is in line with what the Planning Commission and City Commissions have historically done at major interchanges like this. So staff does have a number of alternatives on page 6. One is to recommend approval of the requested zoning change from AG to C7, subject to satisfactory platting of the property and any other conditions the commission may deem appropriate. Number 2 is to recommend approval of the zoning change from AG to PC7, subject to satisfactory platting and any conditions the commission believes are appropriate. Number 3 is postpone consideration if additional information is needed. And number 4 is to deny the application for the rezoning, citing the reasons thereof. Staff would recommend option 2, and we do have a few conditions that we have listed. One is that uses on the 10.49 acre site shall, and that probably should be 9.47. So 10.49 includes the right-of-way that the applicant is proposing to dedicate, so this should be 9.47. Acre site shall be limited to those permitted uses listed in the district regulations, as well as the bulk and use limitations of the C7 district. Number 2, signage would comply with the C7 district size and height limitations. And number 3, that a final development plan shall be submitted and approved by the Planning Commission before a building permit could be issued. And number 4, a final plat would be approved prior to final zoning approval for the site. With that, staff would take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for Dustin regarding the application or the anything in the attachment number 2 regarding the suitability and how it was determined to be suitable for a zoning change? Okay, none being heard. Gary, you're up again.
Thank you, Gary Hobby with Southlands Development. We do appreciate the fact that Mr. Hurst did catch the idea that our zoning lot is only going to be about 9.5 acres. It'll be about 1 acre left in the streets and utility areas as a right-of-way area as well. So we appreciate him catching that, because that's exactly right. And we do ask for your affirmative vote for our zoning of C7 for this parcel of land.
Okay, are you aware that the staff's recommendation is for a PC7? Are you okay with that?
Okay, we've been talking C7 all along. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. That brings us into more development process than what we had originally thought about doing. So if that's what it takes.
Can we, what was Dustin, can you repeat what your guys' recommendation was, please?
Sure. So what our recommendation is to continue the historic practice of having a planned development district or Plan C, planned commercial district designation, zoning designation for the property because of its close proximity to the interchange of I-135 and Waterwell Road. So if you look at the zoning map currently, The Yost addition is PC7 to the south. The property that was recently zoned for Mr. Augustine at the southwest corner or southeast corner of Waterwell and I-135 was PC5. The dealerships are PC5, and if you go to our other interchanges, they also have planned commercial elements to that. And the purpose and reason for that is to have an opportunity for the Planning Commission to review all of those site plans and development plans and to put any conditions that are necessary. Because of sometimes when properties are located adjacent to major interchanges, there's additional criteria that the Planning Commission may want to consider. And when we get to the plat here pretty soon, on the next item, you will note that as part of the traffic study, there are a lot of left turns that are being suggested on the roads, for the different roads that are being proposed. By having a planned commercial district, those improvements could be a condition of that site plan approval. So it gives you an instrument to apply certain conditions that might allow the property to move forward before certain improvements are made. So in other words, having conditions on a plan that would allow the plan to move forward before those improvements are put in.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Jake Bradley. I'm one of the owners of Southlands Development. Just so I'm hearing you correctly, so you want PC7 so you can okay what they're going to plant, what the surrounding is going to look like? Is this a stipulation you can put on C7 without having PC7 in place?
No.
It is not, okay.
So the main difference between PC7 and C7, just so everybody's clear, is that with PC7, the final site plan will be reviewed by the Planning Commission instead of staff administratively. Okay. So what that means is once the convenience store has their plans fully developed, assuming the plat gets finalized and everything else gets taken care of the way it needs to, that final site development plan, as well as the landscape plan and building elevation drawings, will come before this board for their review versus just coming to the city staff for our review.
So the PC7 is slowing down the process after the lot has already been sold. It's just during the development stages of the building?
You could put it that way. I mean, it does add an extra step.
Okay.
In a way. I mean, it's either way, the site plan has to be reviewed, but with the PC7, it gets reviewed by the Planning Commission instead of city staff.
Okay. So if we were to do that 9.47 as PC7, 2 years down the road when we get ready to do phase 2, is that going to be PC7 recommendation, or is it something that follows suit once we've done this, or can we still apply for C7 for the additional lots?
I mean, you could still apply. It would be the discretion of the Planning Commission and the governing body on what the rezoning should be. Okay. They're the ones that are going to ultimately make the decision. Our recommendation is just based on trying to be consistent with past practice and treating everyone the same that has developments at interchanges.
I understand that. My only concern is the company that's coming to town, they've got 700-800 locations. You can look them up online. It's the Maverick Come and Go stores. I would hope that they're going to try and make it, the appearance of the outside and everything, look good. You don't want a place that looks run down or does not look something that you would want to be pulling into. So at this point in time, I'm still pushing for the C7. I don't want to do PC7 just to have additional strings attached. So if that's the case, how do I present that to you, commissioners?
Sure. Well, I mean, your initial application is for C7.
Okay.
So that is an option that the Planning Commission and City Commission could consider. Our recommendation to staff is the PC7, just for the reasons that we said, that's been the historic practice, and with this being a major gateway corridor area and interstate interchange being consistent with that.
Okay.
And my guess is if this company has 700 stores, they've been down this avenue before.
Yeah, they have. But again, I just like to keep things as simple as possible.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, we want to keep things as homogeneous as possible.
Okay.
We've done this at other interchanges, and we've done this to create a kind of a homogeneous look to the town, the gateways, and the things that we expect as far as landscaping, signage, that type of thing.
My only concern is I was at one of these meetings with Mr. Augustine, and I don't think he was real happy with the end results. They want him to plant trees on the interstate side, and he had explained that he'd been down interstate, and there's many lots that have not been managed or maintained. So I'm just going off of what his reaction was. So if he's a developer himself and he's getting ready to do it, I just don't know how many additional hoops this is going to create for the customers that someday we're going to be selling these lots to. Is it possible that I ask you guys to approve the C7? And if that's not the case, can we still, in this meeting, go back? I'm okay with PC7, but my first decision would be to do C7.
So,
How does that work?
so here's a potential scenario.
Okay.
The planning commission could recommend C7, it goes to the city commission, and they say, we prefer PC7, and they send it back down to the planning commission.
Okay.
Which means more time.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid.
But I mean, that's up to the planning commission on how they want to vote and
Well, you actually answered the question. If it's out of their hands right now, it goes to the city commission level, then it comes back down to you. Let's just go with the PC7. I'm okay with that. Time is of the essence right now. This company I started working with November of 2022, so they are on the go. They want to get going as fast as we can.
We understand that, and we are excited to have
So
more
if
business
somebody
in
would
town.
like to get going as fast as they can, then the operative question is, does Maverick Come and Go have a site plan for this site? Because if they do, then that's not going to slow down the process at all. If they don't, and they haven't even started on one, then that will. But I want to walk through a couple scenarios of how this has worked. So one of the things Mr. Augustine proposed on the north end of his lot adjacent to Waterwell Road is a 24/7 convenience store that he was originally proposing to build there. That was approved as Plan C5, and if he were to build a convenience store there, his site plan for that convenience store would come back before the Planning Commission for your review. And if the study indicated that they needed a right decel lane for the convenience store, you could make that a condition of your site plan approval. If that wasn't a planned district, you wouldn't have that authority. So that's part of the reason for doing it. The other reason is we can't, as city staff, recommend that Mr. Augustine at the southeast corner be subject to a site plan review and then say it doesn't matter at the northwest corner. Because Home Automotive, when they go to build their dealership on the north side of Waterwell, will have to come before the Planning Commission with their site plan. And Mr. Augustine will have to come before the Planning Commission with the site plan. And Ashby Furniture Warehouse had to come before the Planning Commission with their site plan. So to be consistent, that's what we're recommending. You don't have to support or agree with our recommendation. We just do it because we have to be consistent. But to give examples of the way this has worked out, in the case of Mr. Augustine, he has a planned commercial district, and he may come in 2 years and build his convenience store, or he may amend it to something else. That's called a deferred site plan, because he doesn't know at this moment. If you do have a use and you have a site plan when you walk in the door, in the case of the Popeyes, now a Blardo's restaurant, the Planning Commission would not make a recommendation on the zoning on that without a site plan. So the site plan was reviewed concurrently with the zoning request. And then there was a case that was done where the owner applied for C6 zoning. The Planning Commission recommended that it be amended to Plan C6 because of neighborhood concerns. The City Commission concurred with that, and it took that applicant about 3 months to come back with a site plan that came back to the Planning Commission, which recommended Plan C6 zoning and his site plan. So there's two ways to do it. One is to approve the zoning and the site plan concurrently, or the other way is to approve the plan zoning with a deferred site plan. And so if the zoning and if the site plan's ready, then they can be considered concurrently. But if the site plan for a convenience store is not going to be done for 3 months, it is adding another layer at that point, but it's not really delaying the process because it's the fact that the site plan won't be ready for 3 months that's delaying it, not. So if the site plan's already done, it could have been submitted with this application.
So to Mr. Andrews' point, the site plan I'm pretty sure is done already, so it's not going to slow it down.
Okay. So, and your last comment was that you were okay with the PC7?
Yeah, I'm okay with PC7. At this point in time, it's not ideal, but again, if it's not going to slow it down, I'm not too worried about it. So if you guys have any questions for me, since I'm up here, certainly.
Well, a site plan's gonna be needed regardless, right?
It is, but it's just a matter of who's doing the point we're making when you have complicated projects like Menards or something like that. Those are usually done as planned commercial districts because it gives the planning commission and the governing body the ability to put conditions on. And so things like Sam's Club, Walmart, everything up and down South 9th Street is planned commercial because if you're supportive of the development on the condition that a traffic signal be installed or a turn lane be added or this, you can't do that with straight commercial zoning. You can only do it through a plan. And so if there's things that are like that that might say, well, this site only works if we have this improvement or this turn lane or this added, you can make sure that happens through a planned commercial district. There's no assurance that it can happen if it's just a straight zoning because you can't attach conditions to a straight rezoning. And so that's the distinction.
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarification. Thanks for your time, guys.
Good. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Anyone from the audience care to address this application? Appears we have no one. Dustin, do we have anybody online?
We do not have anyone online right now.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I'd move that we approve requesting the change to a PC7 district versus a C7 as outlined in C, and it would be the same as the recommendation for the staff that the staff made. I don't know how to shorten that up, but there's probably a...
So it's recommendation number two.
Yep.
Okay.
Does that include the recommendations on?
Yes.
Right.
With the change in size.
Acreage, yeah.
Yep. Is there a second?
I second that.
And, okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve application Z24-1 with option number 2, which would be a PC7. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Okay, we're moving on to item D.
So this is the final sub-item of 3.1, and this deals with the proposed preliminary plat. I'll pull up a drawing of the preliminary plat. So in conversations with the applicant, their first focus is the south 55 plus acres in which you recently talked about with the comprehensive plan, amending it from employment to commercial so that commercial activities can be developed on this property and constructed on this property. And what the applicant is proposing is a single plat for a lot that would be 9.47 acres at the northwest corner of the interchange, which is the same property that we just discussed with the rezoning. And in our review, we do have a few correction items or clarifications that we need to get with the applicant on before we feel it's ready to be approved, and we have listed them in the report. The first is that the scaled down plat, which focuses on the convenience store site, was not accompanied by a revised updated drainage study, and there is no proposed site drainage plan. It is not clear whether stormwater detention for the convenience store will be located on the site or off-site. We know that drainage will eventually be proposed to get to Dry Creek. It's a matter of, is there going to be on-site detention on this lot? and then drainage easements that would carry the water to Dry Creek, or there'll be off-site detention, and that will also require separate instruments, easements by separate instrument. Number two, staff does not have a preliminary plat for the south 55.84 acres that shows one building lot and then one holding lot that extends west of Dry Creek and shows the contours and the floodplain boundary of the proposed utility line extensions. What that would mean is a drawing similar to this, where you would have the Lot 1 area and the right-of-way, but then you would have a holding lot for the balance of the 55.9 acres, and then having the contours in place for that holding lot and for the proposed development, as well as the utility line extensions. The Director of Utilities has not seen or approved a utility line extension plan for this property. And then number 5, lastly, or 4, is the ownership status of Waterwell Road is unclear, and staff has been unable to prepare a perimeter street analysis for the proposed subdivision. And what that gets into is the status of who owns Waterwell Road and the type of instruments in which that is conveyed. So there's different types of real estate instruments that convey properties being used for streets. One is an easement to allow for a road to be constructed in an easement. And there's also right-of-way that is held by the city. And there's also public right-of-way that is held by the Kansas Department of Transportation. And of those 3 options, we're a little unclear on which portions of Waterwell Road are KDOT right-of-way, which portions are city right-of-way, and which portions are county roadway easements. And so understanding that better and having that better documented is going to be critical before we can move forward with the plat being finalized. And so for these reasons, staff would recommend consideration of preliminary plat for the Winnie Creek addition be postponed by the Planning Commission. And we do have the next 2 Planning Commission meetings listed as March 5th or March 19th. Whichever meeting you postpone to, we would want to make sure that that's noted. We listed them both because we don't know the time frame that the developer has to address these issues, or the developer needs to address these issues. With that, staff will take any questions we might have.
Any questions?
Do you want to clarify something for the commission? The items A, B, and C, you have held hearings on and made recommendations. Those are going to result in ordinances being prepared for the City Commission's consideration on March 11th, 2024. The preliminary plat does not go to the City Commission, so what you do with the preliminary plat will not affect the timing of those other items. But one of the things we wanted to point out, that we have what Southland Development's trying to do is identical to what Salina Destination was trying to do over at Magnolia in Virginia, except the difference is in that case, we identified 3 things that were outside the boundary of what they were going to final plat, and they were going to dedicate right-of-way for Magnolia Road that was outside the plat. They were going to dedicate an emergency access easement that was outside the plat, and they were going to dedicate a drainage easement to drain the apartment site over to Dry Creek. And those were all identified and exhibits prepared, and they agreed to do those things. We don't, at this point, have any of those ironed out, but the not acting on the preliminary plat is not going to affect the timing of those other things going forward to the governing body.
Gary Hobby with Southlands Development. We do have some preliminary plats with the information as necessary that city staff needs. Includes the contours and also includes some off-site drainage area. But we're not 100% clear what come and go and Maverick wishes to do with on-site detainage of this particular area. They do have some site plans that are in the process of being developed. We've seen some preliminary plans of those, so postponing this to our next meeting, we would appreciate the March 5th meeting, be able to have the information to the city staff and brought back to you without any problems, so.
That
I'll
give
be
you
glad
enough
to-
time to,
And that would
Yes.
still occur before the March 11th City Commission
Great.
meeting.
And our fact is, it's a matter of turning on some layers, majority of the problems that we have, or issues that we have that we can turn. So turn
One
on a
of-
few more layers and we should have something here for us.
Because we've been dealing with other things we haven't really communicated or had much dialogue with the applicants about, and you're familiar with our perimeter street analysis and the dealing with the development agreements. So because we've been dealing with other technical issues related to this plat, it's important to understand that the default position is that the developer will go in, bring Waterwell Road up to city standards, put in curb and gutter and all that. As we know, our developments, especially when you're on a fringe area like this, the developer has the discretion to ask for that to be deferred through a development agreement. And in December, you recommended that even the sidewalk requirement be able to be deferred. So we're going to ask either Mr. Hobby or Mr. Bradley to enunciate for us that they are not interested in upgrading Waterwell Road to a full city street standard, and they would like those improvements to be deferred. And then that would tell us that we need to look at doing a development agreement for this property, and that could be taken into account when we do our street analysis for you. But we need things like the existing street width, confirming all of our right-of-way widths to make sure that we don't have to modify anything to accommodate those things. But
and March
I'm
5th gives
gonna-
us enough time to
I'm
get that all
gonna,
done.
I'm gonna assume that all things being equal, the developers would prefer to defer those and not have to
Correct.
put curb and gutter and all that in up front. So,
Would be very correct.
so that's good to
We would
get that on the record, so we
Okay.
know that deferral is the way that we're gonna analyze this.
There's one thing checked off our box. Okay.
So that's one of the items, is that when this comes forward, and if I'm presenting to the city commission, I need to tell them that there's been a request to defer improvements to Waterwell Road, and that's just good to get on the record here today.
We would concur. Thank you.
So noted, okay. Anyone from the audience care to address this application? Didn't
We
appear
do
that
not
we
have
have
anyone from the public online.
Nobody online? Okay, I would entertain a motion to postpone this to the March 5th meeting.
Mr. Chair, so moved, postponing to 5 March meeting.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to postpone application P24-1 to the March 5th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries.
So again, for the benefit of Southland Development, these three recommendations are dealing with the future land use map, the annexation, and the zoning of the corner lot will go forward. And this, again, because of the change to go from first and second readings to first readings of zoning, we will work with the city attorney to come up with the best way to address your recommendation in the form of an ordinance. But the representatives of Southland should be looking for information from staff regarding the March 11th meeting agenda, because that'll be when the city commission takes these up.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Looks like we're at item 3.2.
We have a couple of public hearing items related to conditional use permits. The first of one is a request for a conditional use permit to establish and allow an electronic cigarette establishment at the former Family Video Store at 2018 South 9th. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Aiken to inform you about that request.
Thanks, Dean. So, yep, like Dean said, our first conditional use permit, both are for smoke shops. This one's to establish and operate an electronic cigarette establishment or vape shop. We'll be using those kind of synonymously. And a tobacco shop in the C5 zoning district at the former Family Video Store at 2018 South 9th Street. So the land uses surrounding the property, we have C5 Commercial Strip Center to the north. To the south, we have R-zoned single-family homes. To the east, we have R1 single-family homes. And to the west, we have R-zoned single-family homes. So I'll give a little background. Hookah bars and vapor bars have been grouped together with other commercial uses that have historically all been grouped together, such as alcohol sales, pawn shops, gun shops, payday loan companies, tattoo parlors and piercing studios, massage parlors, and sexually oriented businesses, and have historically been regulated differently than other commercial businesses by local governments. In planning terminology, these are sometimes referred to as LULUs, locally unwanted land uses. The concentration of these uses in commercial business districts tends to generate controversy in communities due to negative perceptions by some members of the public and perceived secondary effects on surrounding areas. So the most common regulatory tool used by governments for these types of commercial uses is requiring approval of a conditional use permit before they can open and operate in certain districts. In addition, many communities have adopted minimum distance requirements between the business locations and nearby churches, schools, daycares, parks, and residences, and also minimum distance requirements between individual business locations to prevent too much clustering in one area. So some of the advantages of using the conditional use permit process is, number one, it maintains a level playing field for all retail and commercial property owners by not prohibiting e-cig establishments. It gives the Planning Commission and the City Commission the opportunity to consider all relevant factors deemed important in deciding whether to approve or deny a use in a case-by-case location. Provides flexibility to determine whether special conditions might be necessary. It allows for applicants, property owners, business operators, and residents to express their views and have them taken into consideration by the Planning Commission and City Commission. And conditional use permits are revocable if the owner or operators fail to comply with existing laws or conditions of approval in the conditional use permit. So I'll fast forward to the nature of this current request. The existing building on this lot was originally constructed as a King's Food Host restaurant back in 1969. It operated between a couple of different restaurants over time, and then in 2010, an interior remodel permit was approved to operate the Family Video Store, which later closed in 2020, and it's remained vacant since. So the building lot and the existing building all meet C5 bulk regulations, setback requirements, and parking requirements. So the applicants here, VIP Smoke Shop, will use the property solely for the operation of a retail space for the sale of CBD-related products like CBD vapes, Kratom and Delta-8 products, tobacco-related products like nicotine vapes, cigarettes, cigars, and various paraphernalia to help support smoking. As justification, they state that VIP Smoke Shop, the property is currently in compliance with the city's C5 zoning requirements, as well as the regulations set forth by the state on all tobacco and CBD-related products. And additionally, the applicant states the building is currently served by existing utilities and only interior renovations would be needed to begin operations. So, like stated above, in terms of zoning ordinance requirements, they meet all those requirements right now. Moving on to welfare and convenience of the public, the Planning Commission must find the conditional use permit in the proposed location will contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public. So the applicant states that approving an e-cig slash tobacco shop in this location would contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public because there's an identified demand for CBD, tobacco, and nicotine products in the community. So staff would note that research shows there are negative health impacts associated with smoking, tobacco use. There's negative side effects or health impacts from secondhand smoke, and there's also research that suggests that many of these products, especially like the vapes with the fruity flavoring, have often been targeted to minors in terms of marketing. However, opponents of vaping point to the nicotine levels, opponents of vaping point to nicotine levels and how addictive they can be, especially potential exposure to minors. However, on the contrary, proponents say that the e-cig industry is a healthier, safer alternative to tobacco smoking. And if this is the case, then this proposed e-cig establishment could contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public by making this legal product available in a convenient retail location. So the question for the Planning Commission here is to consider whether they believe filling this vacant retail space with an electronic cigarette establishment would contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public by adding an e-cig establishment to the business mix northwest of the Broadway Boulevard and 9th Street intersection. Next, the Planning Commission must find that this proposed conditional use will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood, and then it won't dominate the immediate neighborhood. So the triangular area up there, northwest of the Broadway Boulevard and 9th Street intersection that abuts Broadway Boulevard to the south and west, West Cloud Street to the north, and South 9th Street to the east, is a mixture of retail uses, an insurance office, a gas station, an educational institution, and a gym. So accessibility to minors is a concern with a e-cig establishment near the Opportunity Now facility along Cloud Street. And also the subject property directly abuts residential dwellings to the east, the west, and the south. So the applicant states that he will only use the property for the operation of a retail space for the sale of CBD and tobacco-related products. And the applicant adds that this facility will be safe and a secure environment, and they will be checking everybody's IDs before purchases to verify they're at least 21 years of age or older. So staff would also note that many of these products are also available across the street at the Smokes for Less, Yogi's Vape, and Nature's Gift Shops in the Craft Manor Strip Center. And staff is of the understanding that all the proposed business activities would take place inside the storefront, and the only proposed exterior changes would be for signage. So like stated above, public utilities and services, there's already utilities in place to serve this development. And then lastly, in terms of traffic and parking, the property at 2018 South 9th Street is an existing commercial property, and it has direct driveway access to both South 9th Street and Broadway Boulevard. So this site requires 21 parking spaces for this proposed use, and the site currently has 66. And additionally, staff would add that electronic cigarette establishments are not high traffic generating or high turnover type uses compared to, say, convenience stores. So with that, the Planning Commission has the following options in consideration of this application. Number one, they could approve this conditional use permit application if they find that the requirements of section 42597.2 C2 of the Salina City Code have been satisfied. They could approve the conditional use permit application subject to specified conditions or revisions for operating this establishment. They could postpone consideration for additional information from the applicant, or they can deny the application if the required findings of fact can't be made, or they believe this use would cause injury to the surrounding properties if approved in this location. So if based on the information provided by the applicant, the commission finds that the addition of an e-cig shop in this location would not have negative impacts on the surrounding area, staff would recommend that approval of a conditional use permit for this proposed use be made subject to the following conditions and any conditions the commission may deem appropriate. Number one, unaccompanied minors, and that's people under the age of 21, shall not be permitted to enter the premises. Signage shall be limited to wall signs, window lettering not exceeding 33% of the front window area, and a freestanding ground or pole sign. The interior at all times shall be illuminated to allow clear and distinct identification of individuals inside. No drinking establishment license or cereal malt beverage license shall be issued for the premises, and consumption or sales of alcohol would be prohibited. The property owner and applicant shall grant access during business hours to the Salina Police Department, Health Department, and Development Services Department for the purposes of inspecting the premises to verify compliance with all laws. The CBD and tobacco establishment may not expand beyond the existing building footprint without an amendment of the conditional use permit. This conditional use permit may be modified or revoked by the Planning Commission should it be determined that this facility or the conditions under which it was permitted are detrimental to public health, welfare, or injurious to property in the vicinity. And lastly, any controlled substance or drug conviction arising from the ownership or operation of the establishment shall be sufficient grounds to suspend or revoke the conditional use permit. So that will conclude staff presentation. I do have to note that we did receive one letter regarding this request. It's in your packets. But that concludes the presentation, and the applicant is in attendance if you have any questions.
It's one thing we wanted to add is like, wow, that's a lot of conditions and it's a really lengthy report. But the one thing we want to emphasize is that many Kansas communities require a local business license to operate one of these shops. For instance, if the city of Wichita, you have to have a license issued by the city. And because the city of Salina does not have local business licenses, so for example, you're in Wichita and you have a business and they get 12 citations for selling to minors, the city of Wichita will just repeal your license. Since we don't have a license to repeal, we're using the conditional use permit as a substitute for the license. And so that's why we have the language in there about revocation, and we're using this as a substitute for a licensing requirement.
Okay, any questions of Spencer?
How many infractions does it take to bring it back to us to have it revoked?
We're gonna consult with the state law on that. We have the Wichita ordinance that we will look at that, but that would have to be brought back to our attention either by the police department or health department. But that we would use the guidance from the enforcement tools that both the state has. All of these businesses also have to have a license through the state, so we're going to look at what the state does as well.
Do you know what the state inspection process is for that?
No, but the applicants might be able to tell you.
Are you okay if we go ahead and hear from the applicant at this time?
I have one question. We approved one of these over on North Broadway in the last year or so, didn't we? Is that correct?
We approved a tobacco shop inside a motel.
Right, yeah.
Up on North Broadway,
Yeah.
yes. And we didn't, it was so small and it was an integral part of the motel that we didn't really list it separately, but we've by going to the state licensing database, that's kind of how we keep track, but we're just, so that you don't have to try to recall when we are reporting in our reports, we're trying to update you on how many of these you've reviewed and approved and acted on, so.
Thank you. Would the applicant care to address the commission? Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Galap Hamoud. My address is 12112 Omaha, Nebraska. I've been talking to Mr. Spencer about the store and discussing all the conditional permit requirements, and I will follow all the rules that are required from the city. And I don't think so that will affect all the neighborhood for any negative reflections. And if you have any question about anything, I'm ready to answer.
Do you know any of the requirements of the state of Kansas and what the inspection status of your place
Yes, for the
would be?
building inspection and the fire department inspection, and the requirements about the products that we will sell. That's what we applying for the conditional permit for.
And do you have other locations in Kansas?
Yes, we have one in Wichita, 2 of them in Wichita. We have in Kansas City. We have in different locations in Kansas and Arkansas and different states all over the United States.
And are those locations in Kansas, are those inspected on a regular basis by the state?
Yes.
How
They're
often?
inspected by the city.
By the city.
By the city. It's not by the state.
But you have to have a state license for it.
What is that, sir?
Yeah, and you have to have a state license for it, though, is
I
that
have
correct?
to get, yes, I have to have a license from the state and a license from the city.
Okay. And does the state come and do any inspection?
Not the city, not the state, the city. The city. The city who has responsibility to check all the inspection and do the inspection.
Okay.
The state give you, I guess, this registration and the license to open a business in the state, and the city take care of the inspection and other requirements.
Any questions of the applicant?
Well, I mean, we'll give you a case in point. There are state regulations relating to the fire marshal and daycares. And the state fire marshal does not have the manpower to inspect every daycare statewide. But in the case, they delegate it to the local fire departments. So the Salina Fire Department will do inspections of daycare on behalf of the state fire marshal. What we've done here in our conditions of approval, basically the condition is that one of the conditions is that we locally can go in and do an inspection, that we have access to do that inspection because I think the state may do it once, but they're not doing it annually and out on an ongoing basis. So this, as a condition, the owner's consent to allowing us to do a local inspection if we have reason to do so.
Is that the only thing that triggers an inspection, or do we do that on a regular basis for the existing shops?
We are not doing it on a regular basis. We're doing it based on complaint or some violation that's been brought to our attention, but that conceivably we could do these annually if need be.
Okay. Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to address this application?
We do not have anyone online currently.
Okay. And you have seen the letter from the Bennett's? Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate their input. I don't care for this. It's a business, I realize that. One thing, they say it's in their, right across their backyard, but you do have 9th Street, a 4-lane 9th Street barricading that. I don't see many people walking across that, where that's a big concern. I do respect their input, though, and
Yeah, I do as well, and I have health concerns about this industry. And I know what my job is here, though, is to enforce the laws that we have on the books. And we have plenty of these in town already. And I think this is a road that we've gone down and now we
Yeah,
don't have any.
one thing we wanted to point out is that there's no separation requirement, there's no density limit, there's none of those things. We're looking at it from the standpoint that this is a legal product to sell within the state of Kansas. We're making sure that the locations from which it's sold are suitable and meet all of our zoning requirements, and the other purpose is that we have the courtesy of letting neighbors and neighborhoods know that it's being proposed, and the Bennett's are within their rights. That's why we send the notification out, so they can weigh in, and you can give that whatever weight you want to give it. But one of the reasons we do that is just so a neighborhood has advance notice, and they don't say, well, no one told me this was happening or this was coming. So we've given the neighborhood advance notice.
Yep, agree. Well, go ahead.
I've spoken up about this before. Last time we were discussing electronic cigarettes and vaping, and it seems that more and more information is coming out that this is harmful. Specifically, there are so many studies for the young people, and I think the Bennetts bring up a good point, the relationship of this proposed location in relation to middle school, in relation to young people around. I am not a vapor. I am not one of. So I had to go and look up some of this information, and I went to a study from Johns Hopkins Hospital, and it tells how it is more dangerous than cigarette smoking. And I went to a study from the Mayo Clinic, and they say it's less harmful than smoking, but it is still not safe. It is bad for your heart and lungs. And I know in our job, as you put it, Mr. Chairman, as we're looking at this, two of the qualifications that we're looking at are welfare and convenience of the public. And I cannot in good conscience say this contributes to the welfare of the public through some of the information, the research that I've read. The second thing, or another impact that we would have, is impact to surrounding property. And I have a study here that came out in 2020 how vape shops and electronic cigarette shops not only are placed in low-income areas, neighborhoods of the town, but they actually contribute and bring down the values of properties around them. And again, I think that would click into that part there where it causes injury to surrounding property. So my idea would be, I hate to see a vacant building there at a good location, at a good intersection, but I can't in good conscience overlook some of these welfare to the public, injury to surrounding property. I cannot give an affirmative vote on this. And I'll be happy to take input from other commissioners, but that's where I'm laying right now.
Gentlemen, thoughts?
I totally agree with Chairman Brad down there, Barber. It's not an industry I'm fond of, and I do think it has a lot of repercussions in the health of, especially the young people, booze and other addictions. And it's a pretty visible location, and I don't really care for that. I think there could be a different location somewhere, but I don't know if we can prevent it. So I agree with you 100%.
Staff, how many more of these do we have in town? Do you have any idea?
I believe we have 9 total, and there's one over on East Iron that we're trying to bring into compliance. There's a couple of these that were established before the 2014 change occurred, and then we had one that this board approved on West Crawford that has since closed. But I believe that we have 9 total, and I can't tell you, how many retail liquor stores that the city has or any of those things. But again, it's a legal product, but for some of the reasons that Commissioner Farber highlighted, we have put these through a conditional use permit filter just to see if there's a compelling reason why a certain location is not desirable for this type of use. But the approach that we've taken is we don't have a cap or density limit on these, and we're reviewing them for conformance with our land use regulations, and we're planners and not public health officials, so we're not looking at it from that standpoint. Kansas does have public health officials who are looking at this and working with the legislature on certain things, but we're reviewing this from the framework that the cities in Kansas and the state legislature have given us. And Spencer, if you want to show them, this is a sign that the city of Wichita requires be posted in all the vape shops, but the legal age for entry and sale is 21, and so the legislature and others have done what they can to try to prevent minors from accessing the product or accessing these retail establishments, but nonetheless we know that vaping is occurring in the teenage population. But that's the limit of what we can do to try to make sure that there's stipulations and public knowledge that this is a 21 and above establishment.
Okay. Well, I think we're probably on this board pretty much agreed that we don't care for the nature of this statute, but it's like alcohol stores and vaping stores. That's a statute we have on the books, and we have to live within that. So I guess at this point, we will bring this back to the commission for a motion and discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we deny this application based on the idea that it would cause injury to surrounding properties, and also based upon the idea that it is not in the best interest for the welfare of the community.
Okay. It's been moved to deny application CU 24-1. Is there a second? Appears that there's lack of a second, so is there any other motions on this application?
Well, I'll back up and second that motion.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to deny application C24-1. All those in favor, which would be a vote for denying this application, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. 3-2. Application would carry 3-2 to deny the application. Based on the harm to public nature and, okay, you got that, okay, very good. Okay, we move on to application C24-2.
Application C24-2 has been filed for the location at 2629 Marketplace, Suites C and D. And this is a fairly new strip center that was constructed at the corner of Belmont and Marketplace. It's a site that was formerly occupied by a Quick Trip convenience store. And so I'm not going to recover the ground that Mr. Aiken covered about your discretion and why this is looked at the way it is. But the site was developed in 1979 originally for a Quick Trip convenience store, and then in 2006 that was demolished and a 6,400 multi-tenant or 6,400 square foot multi-tenant space retail center with 4 tenant spaces was approved. And so this is a situation where we have done a search through the city and determined that this location had opened for business without first obtaining a conditional use permit, so the applicant was contacted and submitted this application for space out smokes. And again, the question of welfare and convenience of the public. The question is whether you believe filling a vacant retail space in this location with a tobacco shop and potential vape shop would contribute to welfare and convenience of the public by adding this type of establishment to an existing retail strip center. This is primarily a commercial location, although there is a church next door to the east. There's a Sonic, or a drive-in to the north of this, and then we have 9th Street and Cave Divers Liquor to the south across Belmont. This property currently has 27 marked off-street spaces, so it does have adequate parking. And again, the question of value, impact on value to other properties is a perception and somewhat subjective. But the applicant indicates this will only be used as a retail space for the sale of tobacco products, and it will be a safe and secure environment where all staff members will be trained to check IDs and verify legal age. It's a legal product that's available in other locations up and down 9th Street, and so all activities would take place inside the storefront with only minor exterior changes and signage that you see in the photographs on the outside of the building. Again, this is subject to the same review and notice requirements of the previous one, and your job is to evaluate the proposed use of the property and determine whether such an establishment in this location would be compatible with surrounding uses. One thing we were a little unclear on is the application indicated that this was an application for a tobacco shop, but if you look at the signage, it would seem to indicate that there are other products available, such as vaping products, CDB, and other types of products. So we would ask that the applicant clarify that these other products are available for sale in the establishment. And so there's no physical changes needed to the building. The site has existing utilities. The site has adequate parking. And so you are looking at this in the same role as you were on the last application. And so your options this afternoon would be to approve the conditional use permit application on behalf of Space Out Smoke, allowing this establishment to open and operate in this location. Approve the conditional use permit subject to specified conditions or any revisions to the plan that you have. You could postpone consideration to a future meeting if you think additional information is required to reach a decision, or you could deny the application if you think the required findings for conditional use permit cannot be made, or if you believe this use would cause injury to surrounding properties if approved in this location. So if based on the information provided by staff and the applicant, you believe that this would not have a negative impact on the surrounding area and you wish to approve the request, we've provided conditions that are substantially similar to what we discussed in the previous application, and we'd be happy to address any questions that commissioners might have about this location. We did the same process with this location, sent notice out to property owners within 200 feet, and to my knowledge, we didn't receive any correspondence back like we did with the other item. But with that, we'd be open to any questions that you have.
Questions, staff?
This establishment is already open, correct? And
It is
already in the business of selling?
It is already open, and so this was a matter of catch-up for city staff. We believe that if information is available, I will say, in one case, the previous case, that you just, at 2018 South 9th, that business applied to the city for sign permits for that location. We told them we couldn't issue sign permits because the use had to first be approved by the planning commission before they could go in there. In this case, we didn't have that opportunity and the business opened, and so we were playing catch up on this particular item.
How long have they been open?
My name is Abdulaziz Al-Shaif. I'm the owner of Space House Smoke. We have, first time I came to Salina, I came to the city. I asked them for a permit. They say to me, like, the city, they don't issue a permit. So when you have like the license from the state, you're good to open. I got the LLC from the state. I rented the place and I started opening. The business have been operated and open since it's almost like 6 months, since January of 2023. And so far until like December of 2023, I have been paying rent, paying employees, and the wages, like the employees, how much I have been paying, it's about like $71,977 for so far. So if I know like there was like zoning or anything, I wouldn't even be opening. I will give you like an example. In McPherson, I went there and I tried to open like the same business, but in McPherson, when I went to the city, they told me you need a license from the city. So I didn't do anything. I didn't fix or done anything in the premises. And when I went to the city council, they deny it. Then I just like paid the landlord the fees to get out of the lease, and everything was fine. But in this one, it just like it's gonna be so difficult because I worked, I did everything. The business has been operated since June, and about like the other stuff which I'm selling in the shop. I'm ready to take them out of the shop because like they're not selling, because there's like bigger stores in the town. They're selling like the CBDs or the hemp, but as a vape shop, it's just like we have to carry them. So the place doesn't look empty because it's like it's 2,000 something square foot, and that's what I.
So are you saying you're gonna take the other products out of your store?
I'm ready to take them. If you guys want me like to give me like the permit for the zoning, that's fine to take them out because they don't sell. There is a bigger guys in the town that they sell like the hemp and the CBDs. So as a vape shop, I just put them there just to look the place not empty.
So you're not going to sell vaping or CBD?
No, vaping is different than the CBD.
Okay.
CBD is, yes, different products. But I noticed like they were talking about the CBDs that I have also like CBDs in it. But I'm ready like to take them out of the store. Yeah, and just keep the tobacco and the vape stuff.
So there are different regs for a tobacco shop as opposed to, is that correct?
The regulations for tobacco and vaping shops are similar, and they're licensed by the state of Kansas. The sale of CBD oil and things is not something that requires a license from the state of Kansas, and it does not require a conditional use permit. We were just trying to get a handle on the full scope of this store. And so we have one place that we're working with that the they had some, they didn't have vaping pipes or things, but they had some things that supported vaping, but it was like 5% of their total inventory because they were selling other things. So we didn't consider that to be a vape shop. We don't consider Casey's General Store to be a tobacco shop or a vape shop because even though they can sell tobacco products, they're not predominantly a tobacco shop. So this is something that requires a state license to be tobacco/vape shop, but you don't need special approval to sell CBD oil or things of that nature. The application that was filed was for a tobacco shop, and we were just trying to get clarification of whether this was just selling tobacco products or other types of products.
So it's still continuing to sell vape materials, the conditional use permit is still necessary, correct?
Yes, or to be a tobacco/vape shop.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff or the applicant? Do we have anybody online, Dustin?
We do not have anyone from the public online right now.
Thank you. And anyone from the audience care to bring it back to the commission for discussion and
One in
action?
the public.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So it's the same thing. It's the same store, same way, and same products. We're gonna sell the same products. I don't know what we are denying. And other stores is already open over there, and they sell the same products. Smoke shop and vape shop.
Well, just to clarify.
Yes, sir.
He's not open legally right now.
I know. I'm not saying so. I say
okay.
there's other stores too, like Yuga, like there's 9 or 13 stores already in Salina. I mean, they selling the same products. They have the same permit. I mean, I don't know why I'm denied, but
I don't want to interpret
I'm sorry.
the motion, but I believe it was in regards to the location and the welfare of the public based on that location. Is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically, yes.
Because of the zone 5.
Not so much that as it was the location close to residential, close to school children and so forth. I understand the zoning, and that's why it has to come up for conditional use so that we can look at these individually.
Thank you for clarification.
Do you have
Thank you.
another location you could find?
I already work at this one. Do some work on it, remodeling, doing the floors, slide walls, and other stuff. So it's already ready, basically. You know.
His ability to file.
Yeah. The only thing that I need is a license and a permit. And that's all I need to start opening.
This can be a disaster.
But thank you for clarification. God bless
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we are back to discussion and action on this application, C-24-2, C-24-2.
And I have the same concerns, here, there's a church, directly behind this, with playground equipment where young people are out playing. There's if I'm not mistaken, there's an insurance company directly behind this as well. Right next door is Sonic, where people are pulling in. It's a drive-through with their windows open, and I have the same concerns about the injury to property values as well as I look through some of the research. And so I'm sitting the same place I was on the last application. And I feel bad because I know there's been a lot of work put into this building, but I don't want to set the precedent of it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission,
I agree with that. We somehow, we have a precedent already. And Dean, can you clarify for me the rules regarding smoking at those locations?
So the city has adopted a indoor smoking ordinance. And the indoor smoking ordinance prohibits the smoking of any tobacco products or anything that involves the burning of tobacco or other related things which hookah pipes are also a form of burning tobacco. It's known as shisha, but it's burnt tobacco. Vaping is not, the rules are catching up with things, but we do not have an indoor vaping ordinance. Most restaurants, hotels, movie theaters, the city-county building, places have adopted rules prohibiting indoor vaping. It's just not covered citywide by an ordinance. So in theory, you could go into one of these shops and you could sample vaping products inside the shop, but you could not smoke or have a smoking lounge inside a tobacco shop.
So then also there's an ordinance that you can't smoke within a certain number of feet of an entrance to the building.
You cannot smoke within 10 feet of a public entrance to a building.
So
if we have had several bars in Salina that have introduced smoking patios, and they just have to have, there has to be a ring or circumference there around the entrance into and out of the establishment that there's no smoking can occur within that 10-foot circumference. But you can't smoke on public sidewalk within 10 feet of a public entrance to a building. So if you walk into I don't know if the marker's still there, but at one time at the east entrance to the city-county building, there was a painted ring on the sidewalk, and you could not smoke on a bench or anything inside that ring. You had to stay out of it. And so we don't have an ordinance that addresses vaping, but as you can see from some of our discussions in 2014, the vaping and vaping industry caught everybody so much by surprise that nobody knew what it was. And so people would go to restaurants or they go to movie theaters and somebody would be vaping right next to them indoors, and then only to discover that there was nothing that prohibited that. So now the rules are catching up, so you can't vape on a plane, you can't vape in airports, you can't vape in a movie theater, you can't vape inside the city-county building, but it's not covered by the city's indoor smoking ban, because vaping is not smoking.
And we didn't hear from any of the neighbors to this application?
We did not hear from any neighbors that I am aware of. We did the same notification that we did for the previous one. We just did not hear any notification or anyone from the notified area giving us any input.
Okay. Thank you.
Housekeep, Robert's Rules of Order question, I guess.
Okay.
So if a motion is made to deny this, and that is voted against that, then does that mean it's approved? See what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. Well, if it fails, no, I think you still have to have a positive motion.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. So if that was moved and that motion failed,
Then you'd have a motion to.
If the,
Then you'd have to
if
have
the
a
motion failed for lack of a majority, then we would still try to get an action from the planning commission that received a majority of support. And part of the reason for that is that a decision from the planning commission on a conditional use permit can be appealed or protested, so we have to have something that can be appealed or protested. We can't have just a failure to act.
Okay.
So.
What does the previous applicant have to come back to us for another conditional use permit?
Once it's been denied, it can't come back for 12 months.
Okay. Can another motion be made during this meeting to override the previous motion?
If a motion has been made and passed, which it passed 3-2, and I don't have a head count on the 3, But anyone who voted on the prevailing side, which in that case was a motion to deny, and they wanted to make a motion to reconsider a previous motion, it has to be made by somebody who was on the prevailing side. And then a motion could be made. So by my count, the motion was a motion to deny the application. It was approved 3-2. And one of the three members, or only one of the three members who voted in the affirmative on that motion, could make a motion to reconsider the previous question. And then that would be put to majority of the commissioners, and if that got a motion to reconsider got a majority, then it would be right back on the table as if it had never been voted on.
Can the previous applicant come back with a different location at any point in time?
Yes, if there's a different location, that would be a different application, it would be different notice, and it would come back before you. So there, you have denied that location, you haven't denied their right to seek another location or try to open a shop in a different location.
I have a question for the previous applicant. If you came back with a could you find a different location? And would you be interested in pursuing that?
Yes, I can, but I already spent a lot of money on that. I've been leased this property for over 10 months.
Sir, can you go up to the podium just so it stays on the record?
I already leased it for 10 months. I already pay like $55,000 just in rent. And it's more than $100 just remodeling and fixing stuff inside it.
Have you already spent that money?
More than that. And I already buy the license and the sign and other stuff. I prepare for opening next month. So.
Were you not aware you needed a special use permit before you started?
Actually, I didn't notice that until I came to the office to apply for it, and they told me that you are not allowed to do this in this zoning. You have to apply for conditional permit, and that's why I'm here.
There's stores in Wichita, but you didn't come here and.
I mean, in Wichita,
prepared
it's a
for
different.
this?
I'm sorry. The one in Wichita is different story. There's no zoning over there in the stores that I open, the location that I open.
Wichita, they have a local license.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm sorry to keep pestering you with questions. I'd like to have answers like that.
So just to clarify, what occurred in this case was city staff received a sign permit application to put up signs for VIP Smoke Shop at 2018 South 9th. We told the sign permit applicant that we could not issue sign permits for a use or business that had not been approved by the Planning Commission. We then met with the prospective business owners and explained the process for coming before the Planning Commission for a conditional use permit. The application was filed and set for a hearing today. But the way that they found out that they needed a conditional use permit was because we told them we couldn't issue them a permit to put signs up for that use.
That's true.
And that is the 2018 South 9th location that we're referring to.
So the same rules are applying to Mr. Al-Shaif, and it's just that you were unaware of the permit beforehand.
Correct. So somehow, some way, signs were put up at 2629 Marketplace without us having an opportunity to say, no, you can't put those signs up because your business is not a permitted by right use. However, we did do that at 2018 South 9th, and that's the primary distinction. And so we'll have to look at better ways to get that information out to prospective vape shop owners and operators. But the way that we have identified it in the past is somebody is looking to lease a building, they apply for permits to put signs up at the site or the building. We say we can't approve those signs because your business needs a conditional use permit, and then that is The difference is that we have not issued sign permits for 2018 South 9th because the Planning Commission had not had a chance to review the use.
I believe Mr. El-Sharif had a comment he wanted to make. Come to the podium, please.
So, to give you guys a clear picture about Ghalab, Hamoud, and his fellows. Ghalab, I don't know him. This is my first time seeing him here in Salina. But I'll tell you the story. Those guys, they are like big wheel. They came all the way from Nebraska, and they're also located in North Carolina. We had like some fight about the stores in Wichita. So the guy who's in the shadow, his name is Haytham. He's the big boss. They came after me. Any place I'm opening, they said they're gonna come and drop the prices in the city and destroy the business. That's what I'm doing. That they wanna do. When I told them I have a store in Salina, I have in McPherson, but McPherson got denied. I have in Salina. They came, I rented the family video, even if they are paying too much, just like what to do to put Al-Shaif down. That's what they're looking for. That's why they're still here waiting to see what's gonna happen.
Well,
Just like they're taking it to other level, with you guys.
we can't pit one application against another. That sounds like a police enforcement thing.
Yeah.
What we have to do is
I know that, but I just
your
like give you a clear picture how things going.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, we're just considering your application on its own merits right now, so that.
All right.
that's
I
what-
think the best way to look at this from a planning commission and staff perspective is that you are reviewing proposed locations and approving proposed locations or not approving proposed locations, and who the operator is or how many stores they own or those, is the location proposed a suitable location for the proposed use. That's the way we've tried to approach our staff reports. That's the way that you as commissioners should look at it, your findings, and the whole point of a conditional use permit is for planning commissioners to say, we think this is an appropriate location, or we really don't think this is an appropriate location. So that's, the focus should be on the appropriateness of the location as it relates to the use. And so that's all we can advise you is that the business model, the business owners, all those types of things, it's the appropriateness of the location.
Right. So you understand? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Spencer, is there any schools a block or two away on this one?
I don't believe so, not here.
The closest,
Coronado would've been,
the
I think,
closest
closer.
use in this case is there's a church directly
Yeah.
to the east. But in terms of schools, the location at 9th and Broadway, you have South Middle School, that's essentially several blocks, but straight to the east. And then some people know or don't know the alternative high school, the Opportunity Now, is in the building there on Cloud Street that is west of the Genesis Health Club. So that's the Opportunity Now alternative high school. And so that's what Mr. Aiken referred to in his staff report.
Okay. Any further discussion?
So on the screen, I do have the zoning map that shows the surrounding area. All of the properties along the 9th Street corridor are commercial, and the intersection of Belmont and 9th Street is commercial, with the rest of Belmont being residential. So half a block to the east, you have residential, but other than that, everything is commercial along that 9th Street corridor. So this is the subject property, and then you have churches and residential uses from here on over.
And remind me, Dustin, to the north of the Sonic there, is that like a batting cage or there's something? what is it? Is it playground or?
There's a playground. There used to be sand volleyball and things at the north edge of Sonic, and then they had batting cages at the rear,
Okay,
at the back portion.
okay. All right.
So
Thank you.
So this is the batting cage area right here, and this is like sand volleyball and play area here.
Okay.
Need a motion?
I would entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the application CU 24-2 to approve the conditional use permit as outlined with the 8, I believe, requirements that they've listed by staff.
Is there a second? I will second that motion. So we have a motion and a second to approve application CU 24-2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So we have a 4-1 vote and motion carries. Thank you. So and if you want to get with Spencer, he'll get you lined out from there. Dean, application, or item 3.4. Thank you.
Okay, so we're out of the public hearing portion of this. I'm going to let Mr. Aiken have a sidebar with our applicants, and then the final item on your agenda is the final plat for the Markley addition, the proposed site of Fire Station number 4. And Mr. Hers has this report, and he will focus on the agreed upon street improvements to East Crawford and the drainage solution that we've come up with.
Thank you, Dean. So on September 19th, 2023, this board, this commission, reviewed a preliminary plat for the Markley addition, which is an addition for a new relocated fire station number 4 for the fire department. The application has been filed by Tony Schneider Jr., who's the chief of police for the city of Salina. At that September 19th, 2023 meeting, the commission approved the preliminary plat with a 7-0 vote with a number of conditions, and staff has worked with the project designers for the proposed addition, and those items have been addressed, and we will walk through the proposed final plat. So the proposed final plat will consist of 2 blocks, lot 1, or 1 block, excuse me, with 2 lots. Lot 1 will be a 3.2 acre lot, and this would be the development site for the proposed fire station number 4. Lot 2 is a smaller 1.36 acre lot, and it is intended to house the detention pond that currently exists and for detention of all of the storm water runoff. There's also 1.57 acres of property that are being dedicated for public right-of-way. A 50-foot strip of the southern portion of Crawford would be dedicated, and the entirety of Markley Road would also be dedicated because it's never been dedicated as right-of-way. So you have 100 feet of right-of-way being dedicated for Markley, which means the west edge of the subdivision would coincide with the east edge of the municipal golf course. And so the right-of-way would be completely dedicated with this plat for Markley Road. In addition to the 2 lots, there is restricted access along both Markley Road and Crawford. The break-in access is 110-foot break of access for a 100-foot driveway, 100-foot wide driveway, which would be for the exiting of emergency apparatus, fire department, ambulances, as well as fire trucks responding to emergency situations. It does exceed the 30-foot maximum that is typically allowed. However, the project team has worked with the city engineer and is requesting a driveway in excess of 30 feet in order to better respond to emergency situations. There's also an existing driveway that's 42 feet wide on Markley that will be retained with a 50-foot opening of platted unrestricted access at that point. There are a number of easements on the property, both a 20-foot easement along the west property line, a 20-foot easement down the middle of the proposed plat for a water line and drainage utility easement. And there's a 20-foot utility easement along the east edge and a 30-foot drainage and utility easement along the south edge. The purposes of those easements are for the protection of the various utilities that are currently existing. There's a 20-foot water line that will be protected. There is an 8-foot sanitary sewer line that will be relocated to along the western boundary of the proposed Berkley addition, and the drainage easements are there so that water runoff from the ball fields to the south and the recreation area have channels to flow into the detention pond. So previously, when the Planning Commission considered the preliminary plat, there was some question about the stormwater detention on the site and how the park drainage would potentially impact this property and this project. When we had those discussions in September, the city had been working with Schwab Eaton, who's a local engineering firm, doing a drainage study on the ball fields and the Berkley Family Recreation Area and looking at what could be done to improve stormwater runoff. Since that time, that project has been put on hold, and so at this point in time, the only thing that is being designed in terms of the detention area is making sure that the proposed development of Lot 1, which is the fire station number 4 facilities improvements, would have, that this site would have sufficient detention for that new development. So the pond is sufficiently sized, according to the engineer and confirmed by our city engineer, to detain all the storm water runoff that Fire Station 4 development might produce. This particular pond is a detention pond and not a retention pond, meaning it holds water at all times, and the only times that it would not hold water is if the water exceeds the banks of the pond, in which case it spills over into the ditch on the north side of the property, of the Berkley addition along Crawford there. That stormwater runoff runs under a culvert that runs to the north through an open ditch that goes all the way past Brookwood up at the very north here into this field. The other major item that was discussed with the Planning Commission in September was the street improvements. This particular stretch of Crawford Street is a arterial, and one of the things that city staff and the city manager's office and city commission wanted to consider was what type of street standard this portion of Crawford should be developed at. There's a minimum interim standard that requires that you have a 24-foot wide road with open ditches and sidewalks, or at least a sidewalk on one side. And there's also the full city standard, which requires curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides. In this case, the city commission had a study session that they held in January, and they looked at 7 different options, and they selected option 6, which option 6, I'll find a different graphic here. Option 6 says that what they'll do is the city will widen the east 48 feet, roughly 50 feet of adjacent East Crawford right-of-way to at least 24 feet to meet that standard. In addition, they'll add curb and gutter to both sides of Crawford, which now has open ditches on both sides. They'll add a public sidewalk on the south side of Crawford. That would be a standard public sidewalk width. And they would add a hike bike trail on the north side that would go all the way from the Berkley intersection to Prairie Lane. And so that north section would go beyond just the adjacent East Crawford right away, but would extend all the way up to Prairie Lane. And then there would also be a crosswalk that would be added at the Markley and Crawford intersection for pedestrians to cross the street. All of these improvements are estimated to cost around $500,000, but this is the option that the City Commission has indicated they want staff to pursue with the development of the Markley addition. And so staff has a number of conditions that, a number of alternatives that you could consider. The first is the Planning Commission could approve the proposed final plat of the Markley addition, finding that the proposed final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat, and all policy issues and technical issues have been addressed to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. Number two is the Planning Commission could recommend that consideration of the application be postponed to provide additional information and allow major revisions to be made. Number three, the Planning Commission can vote to deny the proposed final plat if it finds that the proposed plat does not conform to the approved preliminary plat, or if additional policy issues and technical issues need to be addressed to satisfy the Planning Commission. Staff does believe that the proposed final plat is consistent with the preliminary plat that you approved in September, and we would recommend approval of the proposed final plat made subject to 5 conditions that are on page 13. And those are: number 1, the developer shall be responsible for construction of all public improvements shown on the preliminary plat and preliminary infrastructure plan drawings, including the relocation of the existing 8-inch sewer line to the west of the proposed building site so that the building is not located over that line. Number 2, a certificate of completion for all public improvements serving the property, including the relocation of the 8-inch sanitary sewer line, must be issued by the city engineer prior to issuance of a building permit for the proposed future fire station number 4. Number 3, all utilities in the subdivision shall be placed underground. And 4, a final retention pond design must be submitted to the city engineer for review and approval in conjunction with an application for the building permit. And any required drainage pond improvements must be completed prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the building. Number 5, a revised final plat drawing containing all of the revisions and technical corrections contained on staff's correction punch list shall be submitted to the planning division prior to recording the final plat. And so with that, staff will take any questions that you might have about the proposed final plat for the Markley addition. And we do have Mr. Owens here, who is the project designer representing the applicant, and we also have the fire marshal online if there are any questions that he could assist with as well.
Any questions, Mr. Hurst? Mr. Owens, would you care to address the commission?
Justin Owens with Call Out Engineering, representing the applicant. I'll just stand for any questions. I think staff covered it well. So,
Well, first of all, I thank you for your patience in getting to this point today.
no problem.
But
Did we correctly interpret your plan that the plan is to construct kind of a weir structure at the north side of the pond to carry overflow?
Yeah, that's correct. We worked with the city engineering to get as much detention out of the pond as possible. We've got enough capacity for our site, but also to be able to take on any that comes off of the parks and improvements that happen there. So try to maximize that as much as possible.
Just to show that you never stop learning. I've worked for the city for over 30 years, and I thought that was a detention pond. And it turns out it was never originally designed for detention. It was supposed to be like the pond at Jerry Ivy Park, and it was a ornamental pond that was there, and there was supposed to be walking path around it and picnic shelters and things like that. So it has this big concrete flume that's attracting water from the south because the city intended it for have water in it year-round as a water feature. It wasn't designed to detain and release water. So it took us a while to figure that out. So it was it was intentionally designed to have water year-round and not as a dry detention pond. So something I did not know till we reviewed these plans, so.
We're never too old to learn.
No.
Very good. Any questions, Mr. Owens? Justin, thank you. And anyone, well, first of all, would the applicant care to, do we have any questions for the applicant? On the one online?
We do have Mr. Kovacic, Joe Kovacic, who's our fire marshal. He is online if there are any questions that he could assist with as well.
Joe, is this a good deal? Are you familiar with the 5 conditions that the staff has recommended?
I know that the fire chief is very aware of those. I jumped on a little late to the Zoom call, but was mostly for your previous conversations also about the vape shops. So, but I can answer any questions that you have for this also.
Okay. Very good. Well, I presume since both our city agencies were having some good conversations there. And
Yeah, I think the main thing is that on some of the other projects that you looked at, whether it was Beck Seeds or Mr. Augustine's development, we were looking at doing development agreements between the city and those entities, and it didn't seem to make sense to have a development agreement with our own city department. So the city commission looked at it and said, these are the improvements we want to support to go related to this project. And I think Mr. Mike Sell has been on the commission quite some time. The inability to get from Prairie Lane anywhere by sidewalk or path or anything has been a obstacle for years, so that's a big improvement to be able to have a way for people to get out of that subdivision and connect to the rest of the world. So
it'll be good. Great. Well, thank you. And we have nobody else online, Dustin?
We do not have anyone else online.
And it appears that we have no one in the audience. We'll bring it back to the staff, or the commission for discussion and action.
Well, I'd move that we approve the application P23-6A on behalf of the Salina Fire Department with the 5 conditions that the staff has recommended on page 13.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve application P23-6A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries.
Guys, I just want to say, as one who has had his name misspelled many times, we have misspelled our fire chief's name in this packet, so I'm sure that would be tremendous to be corrected.
We have. That was Sydney Soderberg's job, or not job, but that's what she always did. She was a former planning commission member, and she could pick out a misspelled word from a half mile away.
Did I say police chief? I meant to say fire chief.
Yeah,
Fire chief.
I knew what you meant. Unfinished or other business?
well, I guess my first thing was raise your hand if you're old enough to remember King's Food Host.
King who?
King's Food Host.
On the corner?
Remember
That was-
JB's Big Boy?
So that was a big restaurant in the 70s. I was raised on King's Food Host, so that was a nostalgic moment for me. They're all closed now, but for people who grew up in the 70s, the King's Food Host was a big part of their lives. And it was a restaurant where you went in and they had phones at each of the booths inside, and you picked up the phone and telephoned in your order.
How fun.
Cool.
So when I thought it was important to note that the building at that corner was first a King's Food Host before it was Big Boy or Key Mars Restaurant, which most people remember it as Key Mars. We will meet on March the 5th because we'll have the Southlands preliminary plat coming back. And then I can never memorize when spring break is for USD 305 schools, but I've learned over the years that spring break is almost considered to be a holiday like the Christmas period, and so please check your calendars to see if you have conflicts on March the 19th, because we do have a scheduled meeting then, and we do have an application filed. The Salina Downtown Inc. would like to establish a downtown farmers market, and there's an application for that that will be on your agenda for March the 19th. So if there's a possibility that that is a spring break or travel time and you won't be available, please let Margie or another staff person know, just to make sure that we think we can get a quorum for that.
And also on the other business, Dean, I would like to, it seems like we need some clarification on this vape and tobacco shop stuff. Some things I would like to review, or at least maybe have a study session or talk about in possibly in conjunction with the city council, is the notification distances that we give to people. 200 feet seems pretty short to me. You know, if this is a business that's going to impact somebody, I mean, if I was within 200 feet, if I was within 500 feet, I'd want to know. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is about the vape rules, and this is more of a question. So how does that get changed or come up about vaping in indoor spaces?
Well, that would be I think we have to start with having a general understanding of the current ordinance and its origins, and then that is an ordinance of general application. That was something that was not easily worked through to get it established in the first place, but we can provide some historical background of how long that's been in place. I think, hopefully in our reports, I think we've had a definition of how that is defined in that ordinance. And so it just so happens that we had a intern that worked on over the Christmas break, and most of their assignment here while they were there was researching the current state rules and licensing for vaping, hookah, and smoking. So we've actually pulled together quite a few things, but we haven't really written up a summary of state law. But the public health officials, some of whom are not all that supportive of vaping any more so than smoking, have indicated that for local governments, they view licensing and zoning as the two main tools for dealing with the physical location of retail spots. But in terms of the indoor consumption of the product, we'd have to start by getting you information about the smoking ordinance and then the licensing and state laws. So I've got a copy of the license application. I have a list of every licensed smoking or tobacco establishment in the city of Salina. I have the applications and the ordinance that the city of Wichita has, and we've got the state laws. So we can start with that and see if we can put together a summary for you. But this is it's a standard conditional use permit, and our conditional use permits have a 200-foot notification area. The only use we have in our city code that requires a bigger notification area is if you're going to erect a brand new cell tower our notification area is 500 feet. And the rationale behind that was that a large or very tall cell tower could have more, impact a larger area than just 200 feet. So that can be looked at.
Great. Thank you. Other business?
I have
I'm sorry, public forum.
I have one other thing.
Go ahead.
If you're used to looking for my name on my emails that I send out, there's going to be a new staff person coming this week, so keep an eye out for other names sending emails, and don't just look for Margie.
Okay. All right, we'll keep our eyes open.
And spring break is March 11th through 15th.
Okay, so the 19th is potentially safe.
Potentially.
Yeah. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are adjourned.